Alright guys, Murph's here. And today we're going to talk about my first experience with Steel Challenge. Now, I have done this type of discussion thing before in the past. When I first started shooting IDPA, I did an entire video on IDPA. This is the same overall concept. And if you're interested in IDPA, go ahead and check out the link in the description to the original video covering IDPA. Today we're going to talk about Steel Challenge. Now, how did we get to this point? Because I've been pretty dedicatedly shooting IDPA for quite some time. Here recently, I showed up for our monthly IDPA match, and it was a very, very foggy morning, and the match director decided that he was going to go ahead and cancel the match. Now, the funny thing is, we all knew that by about the time we were supposed to start shooting, the fog would clear up, and it did, in fact, wind up working out that way. I think the match director had some other stuff going on this particular day and just really didn't want to go through the effort of running a match and then turning around and having to go and do the things that he had to go do. So it was decided by the other people who were there at the match that we should try shooting some Steel Challenge. Turns out the match director for my range's Steel Challenge was out there, and we went over to that container, we grabbed a bunch of targets, we started laying things out. Now, a lot of us who were out there had never shot Steel Challenge before, so they kind of did a very broad strokes explanation because we were not necessarily shooting true Steel Challenge. This was a pickup game, more or less. You know, a bunch of us were outside at the same time. We decided we were going to play basketball type of deal. So, with that being the case, we kind of massaged some of the rules, and really it was kind of like whatever it is that you wanted to get out of the shooting out of the shooting day, with kind of like the vague outline of Steel Challenge thrown over top of it. So, what we're going to do first is talk about like what Steel Challenge actually is. Then we're going to talk about what my field interaction with Steel Challenge was, go over my equipment that I used, and then discuss my actual range performance, because why not? You know, we got the footage, let's not waste it. So, Steel Challenge is a fast-paced, speed-based shooting competition. And you have two different kind of, I guess, branches. You have rimfire and then you have centerfire. Now, obviously, rimfire is 22s, and then centerfire is anything greater than 9mm or 38. Now, within these two branches, you have multiple divisions. So on the rimfire side of things, you have with optics, with just iron sights. You have rifle with optics, you have rifle with iron sights, so on and so forth. On the centerfire side of things, you have like a limited, you have an open division, you have a stock type division, and all that kind of stuff. Revolvers, so on and so forth. And a lot of it talks about, it's not like IDPA, where IDPA has like their strict little box and all this kind of stuff, and you know, a list of approved firearms and all these types of things, and you know, 40 pages of rules. Steel Challenge's rule book is much shorter, and they're much more open about an awful lot of things. But like open division, speaking of open, is anything that has any pistol that has like a frame mounted optic, and then also like compensators and all those types of things. True full-on race pistols, as opposed to stock division, where you can't add anything that isn't supposed to be on the gun already. And of course, there's a carry optics division and all that kind of. And carry optics is more or less just like stock, just you have an optic. Now, within those divisions, there's some gear restrictions and all that kind of stuff, but they're a little hazy. Keep in mind, again, this is not like IDPA, so the basis for this is not supposed to be self-defense shooting and all that kind of stuff. The idea is to not be shooting from underneath a garment or from concealment. In fact, the rules in Steel Challenge expressly state you will not utilize a cover garment and you will not use an inside the waistband holster. So it is supposed to be more geared towards like race type rigs and all that kind of stuff. Actual shooting belts, conventional outside the waistband holsters, guns that are built to be perhaps more on the competition side or 2D side of things, instead of maybe preferencing compact handguns like IDPA kind of preferences, but doesn't really. It's actually kind of funny. We were out there, and one of the guys that was on my squad was like, oh, hey, you know, sometime we should just come out here and shoot our carry pistols. And I'm sitting there and like, and I actually even said out loud, you guys aren't shooting your carry pistols? Like, it's the whole point of IDPA. That guy was out there shooting a full-size 1911. Like, okay, whatever, dude. Whatever works for you. Anyway, back on track. Now, in Steel Challenge, how it's set up is that you have 5 steel targets. One of them is the stop plate, so that's the last target to be shot. You can shoot those targets, for the most part, in any order that you want. There are some restrictions at some levels of matches that might dictate an order, but for the most part, it's whatever, it's shooter's preference, however it is that you want to shoot it. And you will shoot that course of fire 5 times. Of those 5 scores, your worst one, your worst time will be thrown out. Now you have a cutoff. You cannot take more than 30 seconds to shoot the entire course of fire. So if you have something going on, a bunch of malfunctions, you're just having a lot of trouble hitting that one target, if it exceeds 30 seconds, they'll stop you. That's going to wind up being your worst time, and you don't want to do that a second time. If you shoot the stop plate too early and then shoot something else, that is a 3-second penalty. So it's best to, track down an order and stick with it. Now there is one course of fire that you only shoot 4 times, and that is called outer limit, and then they'll take the average of your best 3 scores. You put all that together, then you get your overall thing. On this particular day, we would not be shooting for time. No timers were brought out. I could have brought out my own, but it wasn't congruent with the situation, so I just kind of left it where it was. Now, in Steel Challenge, there's not a lot of movement. In fact, outer limits is really the only time you move from one position to another, and it's only like 6 feet. Like, it's not far. So in an actual sanctioned match, you only have that one time where you have to do movement. Now, when it comes to sanctioned matches, when you're talking about like everything's arranged in levels, right? You have your local matches that are only supposed to shoot 2 of the 8 possible certified courses of fire that are accepted in Steel Challenge. And then as you kind of progress through the levels, you see more and more of those matches. But even at like a nationals level match, they only have to run, as I understand it, 6 of the 8 certified courses. And then they can have 2 that you can make up whatever it is that you want. On this particular day, we kind of just made up whatever it is that we wanted because we were only running 2 bays. We'll get into that more here in a minute. Actually, I think that pretty much covers my description of Steel Challenge. So let's go ahead and get into what it is that we actually did there on the ground. So we took targets out. We just we set up the targets however it is that we felt like setting them up. We set up 2 bays, and the plan was that we would shoot 1 course of fire, switch bays, shoot the other course of fire, rearrange everything, and then trade off yet again. So we wound up shooting 4 courses of fire overall, 5 times each, 5 targets each, supposed to be 5 rounds each, but I can tell you that nobody achieved that. Misses most definitely occurred. Now, it's often encouraged that you bring 5 magazines to these type of competitions. In this case, I only had 4 magazines because I only had 4 magazines for this particular handgun. It's not a detriment to do it that way, but it does kind of change up things because you might wind up having to do mag changes on the clock that you did not intend to have to do. And that's why they encourage you to have 5 magazines. Now, something else that was not brought up on this particular day was technically most of us would fit into the stock division, just based on we showed up ready for IDPA rules and then switched over to Steel Challenge. So most of us, as I understand it, if I read this correctly, should have only had 10 rounds in each magazine. But we definitely all loaded our magazines to capacity. There was one fella there who was out there with a 25 round happy stick. Like, we definitely kind of just glossed over that portion of the rule. It wasn't even mentioned. Okay, so we went over range setup. We talked about the fact that we didn't keep a timer. And honestly, it really did very slowly degrade into just kind of like messing around. But I tried to shoot it as much like Steel Challenge as I understood Steel Challenge to be at the time as I could. So, with also interjecting my own training and all this kind of stuff. Keep in mind, guys, I do not shoot competitions in order to be competitive. I used to shoot renegade matches just because I wanted to get out there and like work with my equipment, work with defensive options, be it rifles or handguns, whatever. I wanted to work around the equipment that I was setting up and changing things and changing my perceptions and all that kind of stuff. When I started shooting IDPA, it's just to work on, it's just to work out with my carry pistols and all that kind of stuff, and my carry setups, and reevaluate what it is that I'm doing, and what am I doing right and what am I doing wrong, and all that kind of stuff. This is all supposed to be taking my training and putting it against somebody else's metric in order for me to be able to step back and go, wow, I really need to improve on this, that, and the other thing. Or, wow, I really need to change this about my equipment, and then make those changes at some point. So that's my whole point for shooting competitions. So like, I shoot IDPA a lot, but I'm not a ranked shooter. I have not shot a qualifier. I don't even think my range has put on a qualifier in the time that I've been shooting IDPA. Okay, so For Steel Challenge, Murph, what did you show up with? Well, actually, it's funny that I mentioned all this stuff about training with my equipment. I intended to shoot with my duty belt. So I showed up planning on taking advantage of my duty belt exemption. And then it wound up not really mattering. But I still shot off of my duty belt. Now, my duty belt setup, something to keep in mind here, is that I do not run mag pouches on my duty belt. My priorities for my actual duty equipment and all that kind of stuff run very differently than somebody who's just a dedicated shooter. So I never wound up putting magazine pouches on there. I carried one magazine in my handgun, and then if I was in a situation where I actually had to do like a tactical reload and like we're that deep into a fight, something's not going right. I have other tasks and roles in my job that are more important for me to be able to effect than doing like mag changes and all that kind of stuff. So I've got a rifle, I've got magazines, and then I've got a handgun. If I go through all of that stuff and I empty that handgun magazine and can't get to like my backpack to be able to refresh, we've really, really made some bad life choices. And we need to like take a minute and rethink everything. Now, the gun that I brought out was this Glock 23 chambered in 40 Smith & Wesson. All right, so we're out there, we're getting ready to shoot through the courses of fire and all that kind of stuff. How did things go? Now, I do have some notes here in order to be able to keep things straight, but let's go ahead and check out the first course of fire.
Four, I think.
Four, okay. All right, so something that I noticed right off the bat, so stage one did have a little bit of movement, which for the most part is not something that is prevalent in Steel Challenge, but we went ahead and incorporated it. I prefer that. I like stuff that incorporates movements, which is kind of weird because, you know, especially if you check out my discussion on IDPA, like there's not a lot of movement in IDPA. IDPA is designed for, you know, old men. And that's for sure. And I guess if I really want a movement, I need to be going to like USPSA or three gun matches and stuff like that. But I haven't gotten around to it. I've been having quite a bit of fun shooting IDPA, just recognizing that I'm not necessarily jacking up my heart rate like I did in Renegade matches. Not lifting heavy things or doing a lot of sprints or anything along those lines. One of the things that I found, because I did try to incorporate a magazine change while I was making movement, and what I found was that magazine changes out of a thigh pocket on the run are not easy. That's for sure, especially when you got a very short distance to cover. And this would kind of prove out in a couple other stages as well. Now keep in mind, guys, I just shot things through straight. I did not necessarily plus up a magazine every time I finished a course of fire. And that was because I wanted to work on those mag changes out of that pocket, because there's something that you have to practice. Now, of course, mag changes out of a pocket are the most inferior manner of conducting a magazine change. However, since I never set up my equipment to have magazine pouches on it, I will continue to punish myself with pocket reloads until I either stop running my duty belt or I finally add mag pouches to it. And the second thing's probably not going to wind up happening because I'm going to keep it the way I would run it. But I would say the first stage went pretty well overall with those 5 iterations of fire. All right, so let's go ahead and check out stage 2.
You ready?
Yep.
Ready. Nice run on that one. I feel so much better now. I'm not feeling it.
Right is right.
Left. That was 4? That was at least.
Got more bullets, shoot.
Yeah. Feel warm or fuzzy. Don't say that. I'm wearing about 100 rounds.
Well, if you question 5, get another one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's one of those deals, you know, if they need you shooting, they, you know, what's another one?
Right.
Lights are cheap, lights are expensive.
So one of the things that I really found in stage 2 that I noticed whenever it is that I watch my performance there is stage planning and then head movement. Now, we're going to kind of do these in reverse order. First off, whenever it is that we're talking about head movement, what should wind up happening is I engage a target and then I should find the next one before I swing onto it. So either using my eyes, just like looking over, or if it's something that's further away, turning my whole head and then bringing the gun to it. It's a faster movement. It might feel like you might sit there and think to yourself like, oh man, that's going to take so long. But finding your target and then bringing the barrel to it is going to be a more reliable and faster motion whenever it is that we're talking about doing this stuff on a timer. Now, I don't have a timer in this case, but that's immaterial to what it is that we're discussing. Now, stage planning. Ideally, if we were doing this for time and I was trying to be competitive and all that kind of stuff, I would shoot this stage the same way 5 times over because I should get faster with each run. I did not. I changed up the order that I shot things every time. So I would go, left to right, front to back, and then I would go right to left, back to front, and then so on and so forth. I keep changing things up every time. And that sometimes got a little bit difficult to keep straight because I'm like making the decision in the moment what order I'm going to shoot it in, and then like trying to remember as I go through. So I think that was kind of slowing down some of my motion as well. But them's the breaks, Once again, this was for my own challenge. And also, by changing up the course of fire, that should be stressing me to spend more time seeking out that target before I bring the barrel over to it. That's what it should be doing. It's something that I think I need to focus on more in my private training. Whenever I conduct my training the week prior to a competition, I do a lot of dry fire practice, like very heavy 20-30 minutes every night of dry fire practice. And one of the things that I do stress in that is making sure that I transition across multiple targets and then I'm turning my head or at least moving my eyes to it. I'm identifying that target before I swing onto it. I spend a lot of time doing stuff like that. Now, one of the funny things, there's a very large target on this particular course of fire, and I definitely felt like I could just throw rounds that direction. There was no way that I would miss, and then I missed it like twice in a row, and was like, oh, no, turns out you still have to like do stuff. So don't get overconfident just because this target is large. All right, let's go ahead and check out the third stage. Now, one of the things I find funny about the filming of the third stage, so of course I showed it to IDPA, it's a bunch of old men anyway. Like generally I'm the youngest guy at IDPA, or very close to the youngest guy at IDPA. So it's always a kind of contest of me trying to find like the next youngest person to do filming for me. But in this case, I actually wound up handing it off to one of the older fellows, and I feel like he did a great job of filming. So thanks, man. But, so in this particular course of fire, the triangular target that was out there, all of us had trouble hitting. There's just something about that shape that is apparently so irregular that we have difficulty putting our sights on it. Now, from what I understand, a triangular target is not an officially sanctioned target in Steel Challenge. You would not find a triangular target on any of these sanctioned courses of fire. I think is the big thing. So you have like a smaller circle, a larger circle, and then the big squares. Those are the things that you will find on the actual sanctioned courses of fire. I'm willing to bet that in the 2 to 6 side courses of fire that you're allowed to shoot, they can put up any type of steel target that they want to at that point, any shape of steel target that they want to at that point. That's the whole point of it being kind of like shooter's choice. But all of us had difficulty hitting it, and I managed to knock it off the stand, which was at least funny. All right, let's go ahead and check out stage 4.
1911? Yeah. And dude, I mean, I've never seen something hit like that. Like it's just totally fractured and broken. In the gun, I went over to the safe area and cleared it, and I'm like, dude, the mag release isn't like I thought. I broke like. It's how many rounds you got through it? Maybe 1,000, 2,000. So nowhere near where I would have to replace it. Usually 500, you'd be fine. Yeah.
I would definitely go mill.
Yeah, well, and this has definitely got something going.
Yeah, it's metal injected.
Yeah, or laser sintering or something. Yeah. Do you know use it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that
the side? No, that's an always manufactured part. I haven't yeah, this is what happens when the accountants are in charge.
Yes.
The engineers say.
Right, yeah.
Like, no, we just pass this. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll say, we can say cents. The GM deal. Yeah, will that create guys?
Yeah. I don't know. I'll go check. It's a front sight, right? Huh? It's a front sight? Is that what it is? No. This is
Mag catch.
Oh.
Mag button.
That's the reason that last stage I shot, like I dropped 2 mags, they would run random and then fucking dump the mag. Oh, I see. But, yeah. I see what it is now.
Your left.
You know, I put an oversized one on mine. Well, I put new sights on this because I had
Push right.
Go left.
Push right.
my rear sight left over the top of the gun. And I just chalked it up.
All right, so my first run on stage 4 was super clean, and I was very happy about that, which is great because everything went downhill after that. So I massively fumbled a magazine change. I came out of pocket, and the thing was like backwards, upside down. It was every type of wrong that it could have been. And then also, I had a couple of instances where magazines were not cleanly falling out of this handgun, where I'd have to give them, I'd hit it, they would start to go, just a little bit, and then I had to give my wrist a little flick in order to be able to clear it the rest of the way. Not a big issue. I don't feel like it really held me up or anything along those lines. Just something that I noticed, even in dry fire practice, I noticed that with this handgun. I definitely noticed it out on the range as well. So magazine changes got a little difficult, and then also I wound up running out of ammunition on the last course of fire. Like I could not hit that target. I just kept throwing rounds at it. And I don't know why things fell apart, but they most definitely fell apart. Consider this. You're only supposed to fire 5 rounds per string. 5 strings overall. It's 25 rounds per. So we should not have exceeded 100 rounds on this day, on this particular day. When I got done shooting, when I fired that last round and still hadn't hit the target, I had 9 rounds left over in my bag. I brought 181 rounds because I had a couple partial boxes I was trying to clean up. I fired 172 of them when I really should have, like, if everything had gone perfectly, I only should have fired 100. So that kind of gives you an idea of how things can go. I think at that point, maybe I was getting a little tired. Like, this is Chamber & Smith & Wesson. It is a little snappy, so perhaps my hands were getting a little fatigued from a fairly hefty range day, or, you know, perhaps I was kind of mentally lagging at that point because I had been changing up the courses of fire so much. Like, it is very likely that I was bogging down. I've kind of noticed here recently in competitions that come about the last stage, things start to fall apart for me. Maybe it's just that, like, seeing the finish line type of deal. Like, oh man, I'm almost done. Okay, let's get through this. And then it just kind of all, my focus shifts, or, you know, I'm too mentally fatigued in order to really be able to hold it together to get it the rest of the way. So that's something I need to work on. But you know what? It happens. And the important thing is to learn from it and dust yourself off and do better next time. But that last stage definitely came off the rails. All right, guys, so how do I feel about Steel Challenge? Well, I think it was pretty fun. I think in this case, like, every competition stresses different types of skills, and I think that speed is the big stressor in Steel Challenge. Like, it's not so much precision, it's not trying to develop tactics or test tactics or anything along those lines. There's no cover, there's no movement, there's no tactical precedence or any of those types of things. There's no garments, you are shooting a challenge for the challenge of shooting in a competition type of deal. You're not necessarily, the training that you're supposed to be developing here is fast sight and target acquisition, fast target transition, and all that kind of stuff, which is a skill. That's a thing that you should absolutely learn. That's like why we have, like, El Presidente drills and all that kind of stuff. But I think it is very focused in the speed aspect of this. So having a holster that allows you to be able to present the firearm very rapidly, having a gun that shoots very flat, that doesn't have much disturbance to your sight, so that you can quickly transition across those targets. And there are quite a few handguns out there that would do absolutely fantastic at this type of thing. Might have been a little much for this particular handgun, just because it is a little snappy, so there's more movement in the sights as I transition across things. So it's going to be a little bit slower, but we're also shooting in the stock pistol category. So most people are not necessarily going to have the flattest shooting handguns. But if I went with a little larger handgun where I could have more control over it and help keep those sights more flat, more surface area to be able to keep the gun on target, yeah, maybe I could have done a little bit better and all that kind of stuff. Would I shoot Steel Challenge again? Sure, I would. And I would have fun with it, and I would accept it for what it is, just like I do IDPA, just like I do Renegade matches, or any other type of competition that you might shoot. All right, guys. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers my thoughts on this particular subject. I hope you guys found this interesting, and that's pretty much what I got. Have a good day.